Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin. Mario, let's put on a show.
Hold on to your hats. It could be a bumpy ride.
Oh! Welcome to another episode of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Eldawi. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by one of the property pioneers who's been in the industry for over 40 years.
Yeah.
Double murder.
Yeah, you would get less for double murder for sure. Yes.
Homicide. And he's the head of brokerage at Novi Properties. You know, the one with the big Cybertruck that we're actually going to go and have a little spin in afterwards. And also one of the original real estate podcasters. He's got his own show called the Dubai Property Podcast. It's been running for years now. Welcome to the show, Mario.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been a fixture in, like myself, in London and Dubai's real estate scene for over 4 decades. Tell us a bit about how your journey began. What brought you to Dubai?
Well, as you can imagine, I've been through a few recessions in the UK. So the latest one, I wouldn't say I predicted it, but I could feel it was coming. And so I wanted to actually go to Spain, funnily enough.
That's a common place for a lot of Brits.
Yeah, Marbella,
Yeah.
in fact. Absolutely. We got friends who have a real estate company there. So I handed in my resignation. But at the time, the director didn't accept it, which actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise because Spain went into the worst recession, and that was in 2007. But you know, when the bug is with you,
To leave.
I saw another year through. Actually, that year was one of my best years in Richmond, in Surrey. And but I found out that my wife's cousin was living in Dubai. They were in a band, so they were doing hotels. And I got talking to them. So I decided to go out in May of 2008. I organized quite a few interviews, some there and then some already here. After 4 or 5 days, I had 3 or 4 job offers.
Nice.
Decided this is where I wanted to be. Went back home, packed everything, and arrived on the 6th of August 2008.
Wow. And so before that, you'd been in London real estate for how long? Must have been about 15
I
years.
left in 2008 and I started in 1984. So work the maths out. Yeah.
And if you weren't doing real estate, what do you think you would have ended up doing?
I like my sport. My favorite sport is football.
Big Chelsea fan, so I hear.
Yes, massive Chelsea fan. And I also like Formula One. And I think, coupled with, dare I say, my writing abilities, I probably would have been a sports journalist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And in talking about your kind of real estate path, so you started off as a real estate agent, I'm guessing, in the UK. And then when you moved to Dubai, you came in as a manager, or?
Yes. So before I tell you that, I just remembered a funny story. When I first started, my very first day in real estate, having done, just a Saturday job at the greengrocers type of thing, they said, well, there's your desk. There's your phone.
Landline phone.
There's your landline phone. And there's a box of cards.
The hot box.
The hot box, which I had to lock at one stage because somebody was stealing my cards. He said, there you go, get on with it. And I thought to myself, well, get on with what? He said, yeah, well, when the phone rings, just answer it. And say what? You'll be fine, So that was my training. And of course, the phone rang and I absolutely froze and made a pig's ear of it. Yeah. But you learn. But no, I came to Dubai as a manager, and I worked for a company called Ocean View at the time, which was the first real estate company to open up a showroom on Sheikh Zayed Road, which turned out to be right outside the Business Bay Metro. Bearing in mind in 2008 when I was here, and they opened in 2003, if I remember rightly, there was no metro. So the fact that the stairs were or the escalator was right in the front was good.
Yeah. Let's go back to some nostalgia about the hot box, just to paint a picture for people that might not know what real estate in the early days was like. Obviously, we didn't have computers or CRMs, of course.
We didn't even have mobile phones.
No. If you left the office, that was it. You just had to come back.
Again, I would go on a viewing, and we always used to wait 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes even half an hour, it depends. And you would then go, nobody would come or something would happen. You'd go back to the office and I said, oh, they never turned up. And they said, yeah, sorry, he called 10 minutes after you left to say he's not making it. So that was a complete waste of time. We did latterly have these big phones with batteries and of course there were pagers, but none of the mod cons that we have today. You're right, no computers, definitely no CRM, nothing. Everything was very manual. And actually, that's probably why I still write everything down. I mean, the owner of Novi always pulls my leg, but I know where everything is. And if I've written it down, I know where it is.
And it also helps you remember it, the act of writing it down.
And also not just that, but he'll think, I've got it in my phone somewhere and he's forever trying to find it. I know where everything is. So they do take the mickey out of me, but as I say, it works for me.
But to me, I like the hotbox concept of having a card with the name, contact details, and a history of all the conversations.
Well, that was the CRM, wasn't it? In some respects, it's just a manual CRM. But the reason why I had to put a lock on mine, there was a guy who was a good agent, and obviously I was a newbie. And being a newbie, you are always vulnerable, if you like, to certain ways of other people working. And at the time, I used to swim competitively, so I would have to leave at 6 in the evening to go and do my training, and I would do training before I went to the office. So if they stuck around, they were able to open drawers and do everything. And I'd come back, and I would find things missing, and he would be rifling through my box, if you pardon the expression. And so in the end, I got my dad to drill a little hole and we put a little lock on it.
Box, that's brilliant. I remember when I was at Townends and we'd have like the Brook Green office and obviously everybody looked up to the Notting Hill office,
of course.
Which was like, wow. But maybe once a month or so, as a punishment sometimes, the managers would be like, right, you go to the Notting Hill office, photocopy all of their applicants or all of their hotbox, come back and see if you can do business out of it. So that concept of sharing leads.
Yeah. No. I mean, often agents, this is my ball. No one's playing with it. You can't talk to my client. And that happens even here. I remember sort of meeting clients that are with other agents. I made the fatal mistake because I always do this naturally. When you meet someone, hi, my name's Mario, and I give my card. And I did it the very first time, which I've never done since when you're dealing with clients from another agent. This lady agent, she looked at me like, with daggers. What are you doing? And I thought, what have I done? I'm just introducing myself. Because I guess I was naive at the time and I just thought, well, that's who I am. There's my card. I didn't for 1 minute suspect that
you were out of order.
That I was then trying to steal them or even contact these people or vice versa. But you do get to learn some tricks. I remember once I was in Business Bay, so I was going up into the lift to a very high floor. From memory, I think I was going to do a viewing on a property, or I was going to visit an empty apartment. And in the lift were an Italian couple and the agent, and I could hear them talking in Italian, and I just understood that they were looking to buy or to rent or whatever it was. And I thought I'd go for it. Because you speak
Italian.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I am Italian.
You're Italian.
But I then said to them in Italian, by the way, I'm on the 36th floor, whatever floor it is. When you finish with her, come and see me. She looked at me again with daggers. What the hell are you doing? Talking to my... They did come up, but they weren't interested. Yeah. So that could have been a sweet deal.
But I've always had this issue with when agents say, my client. It's like they are not actually your client until they've transacted with you, right?
Yeah.
Until that point, they're just a lead. And I kind of looking at it from the buyer or tenant's perspective, isn't it a bit unfair to be locked in with one person due to office politics or whatever it may be, just because they were the one that had the listing that you inquired about? Like if I'm contacting your agency or any agency, I'm stuck with that one person, depending on what their rules are, and I might lose an opportunity.
It's true, but obviously there has to be some sort of ownership from that point of view. But, there is zero loyalty in real estate, especially from the client side to us. They will go from person to person, property to property, until they find what they want. Exactly. So I always say to all my agents or anyone that cares to listen, if you add value and people see value in you, they will work with
Yeah.
you. And that's the only trigger that will keep someone together. I just, again, I had a story of this lady who bought a house of me in the UK, and it got quite creepy. She was so into Mario, the agent, and everything I did was amazing because she bought this really nice house. But one day, I was looking through the papers because we had advertising in the newspapers, the Informer, if I remember rightly, and I looked at and I thought, oh my God, that's that lady's house. Why is it on the market? Why is it not with me?
Yeah.
This woman would do anything for me, within reason. And anyway, so I called her up. I said, is this your house? And she was quite sheepish, and she said, yes, it is. And I said, well, how come you didn't, invite me back in? She goes, oh, well, it was nothing. We got a leaflet through the door, and my husband just picked up the phone and called them, and one thing led to another. So at that moment, I realized that there is no loyalty, no matter what the person says, unless they're family. And even then, I've had agents whose family haven't listed it with their family member. So there is just no loyalty at all.
You've seen Dubai's real estate market shift over many years.
Yeah.
What's the biggest change you've witnessed?
Well, there were many changes, obviously, since you can imagine since 2008 to date. There's been lots of legislative changes for the better, I hasten to add. I remember developers back in the day, even before I came here, would be able to launch projects and sell when they didn't even own the land that they were going to build the property on. But the one thing I suppose that sticks in my mind, if we're talking about the secondary market, is when we have a cash buyer but a mortgage seller. That's when a seller has a property, has a mortgage on his property. Before the transfer, the buyer has to pay off the loan of the seller. Now, in those days, we weren't able to go to the trustee office and do the blocking at the land department and secure everything. So we had to come up with all sorts of different creative ways, exactly. And there were two. One would be where we would somehow persuade both the buyer and the seller to agree to the seller giving the buyer the power of attorney of the seller, so that once the mortgage is paid off, the seller couldn't necessarily
disappear.
Well, I mean, he could always disappear, but the point is that the power is then with the buyer. The other way potentially was to hold on to probably the most important document that we all have, and that's to surrender the passport. Either in the possession of the buyer or at the agency.
Wow.
So again, the seller could not
flee.
Exactly, because there was a big hoo-ha. What happens if so I'm going to hold on. I have to pay this person's mortgage off,
and I've got nothing.
Exactly, because the transfer doesn't happen for sort of a few weeks later on. You got to get the confirmation letter from the bank that everything has been paid, to then be able to do the NOC, to then go to the transfer office. So that for sure was a change in practices that needed it. And now, fortunately, we still have to obviously get the mortgage paid off if it's a cash buyer and a mortgage seller, but it's all done professionally at the land department, where the property's blocked, and actually all the money is held by the trustee office whilst they then go off and pay off the loan.
What was the longest you ever had someone's passport for?
Well, it's a cash buy, not that long, to be honest with you. A couple of weeks, something like that, 3 at the most, I would have thought. Because in those days, I mean, the quickest deal we ever did was 3 days, which from the UK, it was like that, I mean, the UK even a cash buy can take 3 or 6 months to do. And that was one of the first things I noticed when I came here, how things moved very, very quickly here. Rents, for example. We would have British tenants coming, looking for property. And the first question I would ask is, when are you looking to move in by? And let's say it's February or whatever, they'd be looking to come in by July. And we
that's
said,
what we're used to.
You'd be looking far too early. He said, but why? Because we don't take references. You pay in one check. What's that?
Actually,
no references?
That's a change I'd like to see. I look forward to seeing a time where we say, do you remember when we used to pay
in checks.
rent in check?
Yeah.
Okay, so looking forward yourself, what would you like to look back and say, gosh, I wish we didn't do that, or, oh, can you believe we used to do X? What would you like to see change in the future?
In real estate? Well, again, the owner's going to laugh at this. I think we are too automated. In fact, I think we're too automated in general. And don't get me wrong, it's really easy to get on your app, your banking app, and press, and you've paid your DWA and all the rest of it. That's fine. But nowadays, you just can't do anything without computers. And I have to say, maybe that's just me being a bit old-fashioned, old school, or a dinosaur, as some people say. But you know, times were simpler back then. And what really annoys me is when I'm trying to speak to somebody. I'm very much a person, I need to talk to somebody, not a press 1, press 2, press 3. And then you get to the end of the message and it says, and by the way, if you're asking for this, no one's going to answer your questions. You've wasted all that time. So for me, it really is this AI. It worries me a bit, to be honest with you. And maybe I just need to get over it, obviously. But I would prefer slightly simpler ways, phoning your bank, picking up the phone, and you get a receptionist that puts you through, rather than you're there 20 minutes pressing 1, 2, 3, and in the end you don't talk to anyone.
Do you think AI could ever replace the role of a real estate agent?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It will make life easier. But you know, that also worries me. I think you mentioned at the start, or if you didn't, you know, the column that I write for the National. Every single letter that I get, or email, sorry. They're me being old-fashioned again. Every single email I get, I answer it. I answer it. I don't go to ChatGPT. And I just think it makes us lazy. It really does. And in my office, they said, why do you do all this stuff? And yeah, of course, it's very time-consuming. My Sundays are preparing for my team meetings on Monday. Monday, I do my podcast, so I've got to organize that. And I answer my letters, my emails from the National.
My correspondence.
I used to get up to 20 a week. But I think either people are understanding more the laws now, or either I've done a great job telling the whole of Dubai and the UAE about laws that I don't get as many. So now I'll get 2 or 3 a week, which is still sufficient for the column. But I utilize all that time. So I'm actually at my dining table for at least 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday preparing for all these things. So in theory, yes, I could maybe use the AI side of things. But I don't know, then it ceases to be Mario. It just becomes, I just think it cheapens the whole thing. And I know it's going that way. The portals are now going to make it much easier to write a listing. But then I'm going to think all listings are going to be the same within reason. There's going to be that algorithm, because it's all about the algorithm. I don't like the algorithm.
We're old school. We don't like, Any other change you'd like to see?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I have a massive bugbear about pocket listings. Now,
What about them?
Sorry?
What about them?
What about them?
Yeah.
Well, I hate them. Because to me, a pocket listing is neither a listing. It's
nor
just
a pocket.
Nor a pocket, yeah. It's just a waste of time. And of course, when you reach out to people, and look, people sometimes, I understand, cannot give you the listing because, as you may be aware, most, if not all of the portals, they follow the rules of the land department, which clearly state that for a secondary market sale, only 3 agents can actually market the property. So therefore, they only get 3 Trachisi permits. So I get that. So if you're the 4th, okay,
it has to be a pocket listing.
That's fine. That I kind of understand. Because then there's a means to an end, because sooner or later, either the owner will decide to drop one of the 3 and you can slot in, or potentially they might just give you exclusivity. There's always a chance. But when you speak to people and they say, I'm not signing anything. I'm not giving you any documentation. Bring me the buyer.
Right.
Agents are kind of forced to work in those ways because they need to sell. They need to earn. And we then are forced to potentially market something else in order to gain the leads to put them to the pocket listing which you have here. But because that person isn't willing to work with you legally, causes us sometimes to be illegal from the point of view of fake listings, for want of another word. I hate the word fake listing because every property is real.
Whether it's available or not.
Well, okay, well, that's a different thing. But you see, I don't see any problem with advertising something that isn't available. This sounds controversial, that isn't available, but you actually have something that is available that you can, within reason. I mean, it's got to be similar. Similar, I would say very similar, not just similar. So if someone's looking for 3 bedrooms, you're not going to advertise a villa if they're looking for an apartment and vice versa. So from things like that, I actually don't see an issue with it. So that side of the thing, I don't have a problem with the pocket listing. Where I have a problem with the pocket listing is where people, 2 things. A, the agent advertises a property that A, isn't available and they don't have anything to offer. And of course, buyers and clients and investors are going to get annoyed because it sounds like you're wasting my time. But because there are over 3,000, 5,000, I've lost count how many agencies there are. I understand there's over 20,000 registered agents. Who knows how many unregistered? I guess you've got to find your way somehow. So, I don't like it, but it's a big problem for me. My message, and I don't even have the answer, to be honest with you. What the solution is for the pocket listing. But it's funny because when you talk about the UK, we don't have that. Sellers, landlords, I'm going to say, do as they're told. They play the game. And to list a property, if documentation is needed, they give it. And whereas here, as I said before, there's no loyalty. And even when somebody gives exclusivity, if another agent phones up and say, I have a buyer for you, 9 times out of 10, that seller will say, okay, well, let's talk. So there is no loyalty, even in exclusivity. And before, I remember the land department used to have the ability where if somebody wanted to change from exclusive to non-exclusive, they had a 7-day cooling off period. But now, I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. So there is no protection for the agent whatsoever. And I just think we're often an easy target. We do a good job. In the main, I mean, there are many agents out there that don't really do what they're supposed to be doing. But in the main, we do a good job. We offer, I think, good value for money because it's that intellectual property. When you talk about 40 years, I mean, if I sat here and worked out everything, I mean, I don't remember all it. And by the way, I want to make it very clear, I don't know everything. And I say this to my team. I may have all the experience and all the rest of it, but I'm still learning. And that's why I surround myself with young people as well, because I enjoy how they interact, how they act as sponges. And of course they help me with my AI, with my AI, my computers.
What do you think is, speaking of kind of the contrast between olden days and new days, what's the main difference that you find between the real estate agents of back in the day and now?
Well, again, it was simpler times, but we still had all the same problems. Agents still tried to go behind the other agent's back. I mean, humans are humans at the end of the day. So when you talk about ethics, and I'm not speaking about Essex with a lisp, ethics. You would expect there to be a level, and obviously RERA has the ethics laws and everything that is associated to good practices. But when you're dealing with so many different cultures, so many different ways of doing things, and what's normal to somebody else may not be to this person, that's where you might have a clash. But looking back, I think, well, obviously I'd like to think there was less competition. I mean, I assume are you referring to Dubai or to London?
Both, because I think the role of the real estate agent is the same worldwide.
Well, actually, not.
The tasks are different.
The tasks are, but it's funny because we have people coming over from England. And I remember when I first came over, I came over with 24 years of experience at the time. In 2008, 24 years of experience. And yeah, inside you think, again, you don't know it all, but you think you have a certain standard. And I came as a manager. And there I am driving a rental car. I can't remember what it was, but it certainly wasn't a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. And pretty much half the team at the time, don't forget, this was 2008. And of course, from 2002, they opened up the freehold market and everybody was just buying and flipping and buying. They were making a lot of money. And there I am saying, well, in London, we did this. And I found it difficult to actually get through to people because they'd look at you and say, well, who are you?
Yeah.
You know, look at my car. I know you shouldn't say that. I'm driving a Lamborghini. What are you driving?
Yeah.
And probably it was a Nissan Tida or something. I don't know, some rental thing that I just picked up at the time. And actually, within the first 2 weeks of arriving, I thought, what have I done? I've moved my whole family here. And I had a crisis of confidence. Here is a man who was 24 years in real estate. And I was thinking, what do I do now? I can't get through to these people. They're not interested in listening to how I would do it. And look, I get this is Dubai, or it was Dubai, New Dubai, whatever, and London is London. So you say it's the same. I quickly learned that actually those 24 years of experience, park them to one side. Right. And you're starting again.
From scratch.
Yes, you're dealing with people. Yes, you're dealing with, the viewings, you show a house. That side of things is all the same. But the way of doing business, the different cultures, learning how to even shake someone's hand, how to sit, eye contact, smiling, dress code, all this stuff. It just makes it much more difficult. And you've got to grasp it very quickly to get on. And the more you know about the other person, the more they then trust you, because there is a saying, I like you because you like me. And definitely that to me was a wake-up call. Yeah. So I actually bought a book on confidence.
Oh, that's
which is
sad.
I still have it actually. It was Paul McKenna, and Paul McKenna,
hypnotist.
Yeah, but he was a Capital Radio DJ back in the day, and he became this hypnotist or whatever. And it helped me. It helped me to realize, look, there's no turning back. You're here for a reason. There was no better place.
Yeah.
But of course, you've got to remember that when I came in August, 2-3 months later, the market crashed, and that was a wake up call.
Yeah. I think I experienced something very similar, and I was quite shocked, but it didn't affect my confidence. But I'd say it was a symptom of the difference between, in the UK, you get paid basic salaries and you are an employee of the company. So you have to listen to your manager. You have to be there between 9 to 6, irrespective of if you've got viewings. But coming here, I was like, these guys don't get paid basic salaries. They're kind of treated like partners to some degree. And I always felt that there was no hierarchy. And that's, I think, an important conversation to be had, because you've got the owner of the business, and then you've got your managers, your directors, your heads of. But I always felt that there was a respect for the owner, but the managers are just there as support for us, the partners. Do you feel that?
No, I totally agree with you. And the way I look at the business now, I mean, I have a bugbear about dress code. Again, old school. Most Fridays, people come in a little bit more casual. I still come dressed in a suit and a tie. I'm office-based, so I kind of get that. Yeah. And in the winter, it's fine. In the summer, I do understand it's very hot and it's difficult for them. But yeah, managers, I now see, and this is where I've changed, that hierarchical position, as you say, it has gone out the window. Yeah. My clients are not the investors and the buyers and the sellers. My clients are my agents. Yeah. And you're right, they are their own company within a company. And their success will determine how they run their company, whether they do turn up on time, whether they do work very hard or smart, should I say. Whether they go to viewings and make sure the place is nice before, getting there early. All these little nuances need to be done. But and I've said it before in other sort of podcasts or other events, that I really enjoy helping people. And to me, that's what I can give back. That is something that no one else has. No one else has what I have walked, if you like. But the beauty about that, because when the market did crash, I had to go from being a manager to being an agent. Yeah. So I can look at an agent in the eye and say, I've been an agent here as well. No salary, commission only. I was the first in, the last out, and sometimes it would get to the 20th of the month, and I'd look at myself in the mirror and say, where's my next deal coming from? What have I earned today? And I knew that at the end of the month I had to pay the rent, etc. So it really changes you. And I remember a story. One of my first companies after being a manager, in fact I was a team leader, but my main role was actually still to sell. Is that we didn't have a receptionist, and there were phones on our desks, and the team wasn't that big, maybe 30, 40 people. And of course, those were the days when you had Dubizzle. You could have your own 5 accounts on Dubizzle where you had to delete them and put them on again. And there I am typing like this. So I was always in early to do all my admin work, because we didn't have admins, so that come 9 o'clock, I was ready to face the day. Right. Whereas people would rock up 9:30, 10, 11, whatever, and I was trained in a different way. But the phone would ring, bang, I would answer it. And of course, invariably it's a lead. And it got to the stage where even my team were complaining to the owner, Mario's taking all the leads. Yeah. And I didn't get the response that I thought the owner would do, which would be to say to the other teams, well, beat Mario to the phone. No, he basically cut my legs off. Why? Because he employed a receptionist. Right. Yeah. And so...
But there is that debate. It is a conflict of interest having a sales manager who's supposed to support you and split the lead, share the leads.
But remember, I said team leader. I was not a manager. My job was to sell. And if anybody needed any help, I was there to help. Yeah. But no, but you're 100% right. I don't necessarily believe that proper managers, etc., should be necessarily allowed to close. Look, you do get the odd client who only wants to deal with you, a friend, a family friend, or whatever, and so that's fine. You might do one deal a year, but in the main, no. All the leads I get through everything, through the national, through the podcasts, through my contacts, through who I am. I always just give them away because I get pleasure in you closing. I get a salary, plus obviously commission of the team. So your success is my success. And I always say to people, if you fail, I fail. And I do actually take it quite personally when people come to the end of the road, as often they do sometimes, because real estate isn't for everyone, especially in a dynamic market like Dubai. And you might succeed in other areas, in other countries, but Dubai, it's one of a kind. I mean, my first advice I was given by a mortgage broker, an owner of a mortgage company, and she said to me at lunch before I came to Dubai, before even I came in May, he said, Mario, be wary that the market is like a zoo. And that's always stuck with me because zoo is full of animals, And it is that. There are good animals and there are bad animals, but it can be a bit of a zoo.
They're carnivores and omnivores.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I've always thought that the role of the sales manager is probably like the worst role you can have, because fundamentally you don't own the business, but you've got all the headache and the responsibility. You know how to sell. You can probably make far more money closing your own deals, but you kind of cancel that for the comfort of a hefty salary it's going to be.
Have you been talking to my owner?
I'm sure you're What do you think about the role of a sales manager? Like, do you think that they're not given the respect that they deserve, or do you think it's a bit of?
Well, I'm biased, obviously, because I've been doing it for longer than being a sales agent or a negotiator, as we used to call them, brokers here. So I am going to say it's a thankless task.
Yeah.
But any manager should just actually consider that if his team is succeeding, then you're succeeding, like I said before. So that should be your reward. You've got to remember at the end of the month, you get a salary, no matter how small or large it may be. You get a salary, you're able to pay your way to live here. Because, Dubai, you can live fairly frugally, depends on where you live.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you're in the sort of touristic areas, of course, rents are higher, commercial rents are higher, so your haircuts are more money where you live than they are down in Satwa or Deir or places like that. So that's what I'm saying. You can live frugally if you go to certain areas. It really is a thankless job in that respect, but the rewards are the team. Now, of course, if the team isn't doing well, just like a football match, it's always the manager that gets blamed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but of course, if your football team isn't scoring, then you've also got to look at your strikers. And when you're looking at the team, are they working to the capability that they can? Have they become a bit lazy? Has the last sale gone to their head, which often happens. Yeah. And I would always say to people, stay humble, because you might do a decent deal or a big deal here, but money runs out. And unless you're selling a full building at gazillions of millions of dirhams or what have you, where literally you can retire or relax, the chances are after 1 or 2 months, you're back on that grind. So, but in the main, I think, it's all I've ever done, to be fair. I became a manager literally 6 months into my career. I was given an opportunity to run a small team, and I took to it, and I enjoyed it. And I think wanting to help people was that driving force. So for me here, potentially it's a thankless task, but then I just remember that, I get paid at the end of the month.
Yeah. And that's the same with me, because I was a broker or a negotiator for 18 months and then became a manager and stayed manager/director, never owned my own brokerage, no desires to ever own a brokerage, because I saw the grey hairs that would transpire.
I had black hair when I came to Dubai.
But people don't necessarily understand why, because right now we've got a lot of real estate agents jumping from real estate agent to brokerage owner. And I think it's important for the young ones to hear why some of us have had no desire to open up a brokerage. And you've been a manager, head of director for 20 years. Why have you never opened up your own firm?
So it's not that I've never had the desire to. I've always had the desire to. Who doesn't want to be their own boss? But unfortunately for me, we went through some family issues. So when we came here, in 2008, unfortunately quite quickly, and maybe it was the stress of the financial crash, I don't know, because it was a wild time. You literally did not know where your next, we couldn't give things away. If people think that the market is tough now, it's tough because of competition, but people want to buy.
Yeah.
So if you have the inventory,
you're all right.
You're okay. In those days, after the financial crash, as I say, you couldn't give things away, literally. So I wanted to, but during that period, unfortunately, my wife, she was only 38 at the time. Who, incidentally, she was also in real estate back in London. She was 15 years a lettings director. She developed breast cancer. So as you can imagine, that kind of knocked us for 6, and it's something that obviously stays with you all the time. You're living with it all the time. Even obviously I was living it, even though it wasn't affecting me myself. It was obviously still affecting me. I had to keep going. And again, that was tough. And so we put those on hold. We put those plans on hold because clearly you weren't going to do that.
And it's a big risk to take.
Well, absolutely. Certainly from a financial point of view, she was traveling to London for treatment every 3 weeks, literally flying in and coming back the same day because her oncologist was there. He since actually comes to Dubai. Okay. And unfortunately, they say after 5 years, you're kind of in the clear. The cancer came back after 4 years. So we had to kind of do it all again. So for close to 10 years, we were not necessarily in a position to open up our own agency. And, after a while, as I say, you then never get round to it. But I'm also a bit like yourself. It's not cheap to run your own agency. And yes, it's nice to be your own boss. It's nice to make your own decisions. You live by the sword and you die by the sword. But there's a lot of people that open up thinking it's easy and obviously close quite quickly. It's taxing, it's stressful, it's emotional, it's financially draining. Yeah. So you have to have very, very deep pockets.
And if you don't have deep pockets, you have to have an investor.
Well, I was about to say...
And that becomes your boss, doesn't it?
I was about to say exactly that if you don't, then okay. But who is that person? Is he a client? Is he a friend? Is he someone who really trusts you? But deep down, they're not you. And so you might have the name on the trade license, but the silent partner who is funding you is then someone else. And I would wager that half, if not 3/4 of the companies that are out there, the people running them, they don't own them. Yeah. That would be my take.
And as you said, like people might think that, okay, becoming a brokerage owner, right, that's it. I'm going to make lots of money and just close the deals that I want to close and I'll have this operation. But as a sales manager or head of brokerage, you yourself said it, your client is your agent.
Oh, the agents, yeah.
So when you become the owner, your clients are your staff.
Should be the manager.
Yeah, your client is the manager.
No, listen, the staff are always the brokers, and not just the brokers, the admins and everybody else that helps that company to run. Yeah. The IT, the marketing, the accountants, everybody has a role to play. Not everybody is customer facing. But unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because not everybody has the same standards. It is the brokers that are the face and the voice of the company in the eyes of everybody out looking to buy or rent a property. And sometimes agents have good days and sometimes have bad days. And that's where, I guess, complaints come in, or again, expecting to be treated in a certain way and isn't to the standard. I see it every time when people say, I want it deep cleaned. Yeah. A property has to be deep cleaned. Well, I got it cleaned. Yeah, but it's not to my standards. Right. I've got to do it again. So standards are very, very important.
So is it something, I know there were extenuating circumstances, but is it something that you regret never doing, opening up your own?
I don't think so. You should never regret. You should learn. I always say, by making mistakes give you power, because knowledge is power. And when you make mistakes, you learn. So I used to regret, but I've changed my stance. Never have regrets. So no, I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with who I portray. And I hope that people see that. Somebody is helping me out kind of on the social network, and he said, do you know what? You're one of the good guys. And it resonated with me because I never said it myself. Believe it or not, I'm actually quite humble. I know it doesn't sound like, because on podcasts and TV and radio and all the rest of it, but I struggle with it sometimes. When I'm doing it, it's fine. But if I don't plan and prepare, I do fret quite a lot. And so no, I don't have regrets, and I want people to see me as I am. I don't have an agenda, and take value from me if that's what you want to do. I always say, I'm there to hold your hand as an agent. I'll hold your hand. I'll take you on the journey. If you don't want me to hold your hand, it's okay. Yeah. But it's always there like that if you want it.
Oh, that's sweet. And you have worked with some of the biggest names in the industry.
Yeah.
And built some incredible teams and grown some incredible teams. Like, what is the recipe for a strong sales team, would you say?
I always say to my team that please treat your client as you expect to be treated. It's the age-old adage anyway. And always, again, cliche, under-promise but over-deliver. And if you do those two things, then you're pretty much there. Like I say, people, if they see value in you, they'll work with you. And so I always ensured that my teams stayed humble. There are so many egos in the real estate market, not just here, I mean, all over the world. Yeah. And I always think, look, you're only as good as your last sale, no matter how big it is. I don't care what car you drive. I still get from A to B because I have wheels. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a Rolls Royce. But I do find here that the title on your card adds a lot of weight because people expect it, and that's a shame. So anyway, stay humble, treat people as they would expect to be treated, and keep it real, really.
So let's move on to podcasting. It's one of my favorite topics.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And as a podcast host yourself, how would you say podcasting has helped you grow your personal brand?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say any publicity is good publicity, as long as it's positive, obviously. It's definitely helped my brand, if even I have a brand. At least it gets the name out there. So I'm going to say I co-host the Dubai Property Podcast, which I'm on twice a week. But I have to say, I definitely understand the workload that you have to do. Because doing it twice a week I'm going to call it a side hustle, although I don't get paid for it or anything like that. It's a job in itself, coming up with topical ideas.
Researching.
Topics that people hopefully will find it interesting. Now, of course, the name of the place is, the name of the podcast is Dubai Property Podcast. So we have to talk about...
I'll put the link down below.
It's okay. We have to talk about Dubai property.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't just talk about anything. I'd love to talk about football or sport or whatever, but it's about Dubai property. Yeah. Now, the market clearly is so dynamic and so fast that I do, in the end, always manage to find the golden nuggets or the snippets, should I say, of information that maybe a housewife in Canada might be interested in. Because I've been told that it's global, but I don't really know how far it does go out. Although they do get quite a lot of emails from all over the world asking questions, which again, I love that because there's someone at the other end.
Yeah. And you've got to dive into your analytics, Mario. Well, the information's all there. You're just not very tech.
Well, it's not so much that. It's not my podcast, so I don't necessarily have the access to that. At least I don't think I have. Anyway,
because you'd be surprised. Like I look at where my listeners are, and shout out to the ones in Sweden. Like I've got some regular listeners in Sweden, all sorts of places. I'm like, who's listening from there? Like gives you the country list, and a lot of people are interested in Dubai real estate.
Well, especially from the UK, that's for sure. Yeah. And there's lots of letters come from the UK. And even my daughter, who actually, I want to give a shout out to her birthday today.
Happy birthday.
So, happy birthday, Eleanor.
36.
Yes, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I'm showing your age now.
Yeah, so she said, I found you on the I found you on this podcast. And I said, oh yeah. So there you go. Talk about humble. I'd never even told her I did it. Yeah. So she listens to it from time to time. And I've had so many people write to me to say, as a result of listening to you on the podcast, has given me a greater understanding of the market. And I've had people who have changed careers. One of the ladies that actually kind of co-hosts it with me, she does it twice a month, is a lady called Lillian. She was she was an architect in Australia. And she decided to become a real estate agent. Wow. So she came over, I met her, we interviewed her, I gave her a job, and then she started to diarize her journey through the podcast, Diary of an Estate Agent type of thing. And again, it was interesting. Why anybody would want to be an estate agent if you're already, an architect. But I've also had a guy who's actually in real estate right now, who's a qualified cosmetic dentist. And again, he must be making tons of money as a dentist. No, he's in real estate.
Because you can make serious money.
Well, you can. And going back to the subject about being an owner and all the rest of it and how much it costs, yes, you can make a lot of money. I want to balance the scales here and give some equilibrium to this conversation. If we're talking about agents, brokers, owners, the successful ones can make a lot of money and life-changing money, I have to say. But the majority, if you take 100 people, I would say that there's probably only 30%, possibly as many as 40% make it. But it's only the top 10, 20% of that 40 that really make it some serious money. The rest are either just getting by, and there's at least 30, or I would say at least 30% that don't make it at all, and leave Dubai with less money than they came with. So, like I always said, Dubai, the real estate market isn't for everyone. And despite what you're hearing, that it's great guns and all the rest of it, it's still tough. And why is it tough? The competition is there. There's so many people doing it. And you've got to rise to the top and to try and be a good broker, to try and be that person that, comes across as being trustworthy, or is trustworthy, should I say, and follows through and follows up and is knowledgeable and honest and has integrity. I mean, I could go on. All of the above. And it's tough to be that person every single day. But the ones that do can be very, very successful.
And a lot of that perception comes from social media. And, content creation or podcasting is one of those avenues that people are taking to create some content. Very conversational. You can get content for days with little snippets, especially if you're talking for an hour and 20 minutes. That's a year's worth of reels potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what would you say is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to making real estate content?
For social media, being different, being unique. People tend to copy paste a lot here, I find. And I'm not saying, we're not guilty of that as well. I think everybody, they see something they like, they then copy it.
I'd say Novi's quite innovative when it comes to your social media is bang on.
I have to say it's really good. There are
follow Life at Novi. That's a funny one.
Well, actually, I was going. There was a particular reel that I actually frowned upon.
Which one was that? Because that might be the one that made it stand out for me.
Well, it wasn't. I thought it was us doing it, but again, it was something that was copied maybe from America or somewhere. I don't know, where there was the recruiter was standing in the foreground, but in the background there were some scuffles going on and cushions being hit on people. And then all of a sudden they fall over. And the recruiter's saying, come to Novi, we're a family, we love each other, we're this. So I get that it was a play on words and the fact that in the back they're sort of
fighting like cat and dog,
knocking each other out. But again, this is me being very old school. To me, that just wasn't professional. And yet the owner and the marketeers all said, but look at all the hundreds of thousands of views that we've got. And I said, but do we have anybody wanting to come and work for us as a result of that? And they said, yeah, we do. But then I'm starting to think, do I really want that person coming to work for us? But I was overthinking. I was definitely overthinking it. And I was wrong. And that's another thing. Whenever I find that I've done something wrong, I'm always the first to apologize. Not that it cheapens my apology, but I just feel it takes a big person to say you're sorry. And I think there's no point in dwelling on it. If you've realized you've made a mistake, it doesn't mean you can just,
it's not necessarily a mistake. It was your perception.
My perception of what I was brought up with. Exactly. That it wasn't professional. But again, I was thinking through the eyes of, a UK based agency, back in the 80s and 90s type of thing, when often a lot of these boys and girls weren't even born, So, but going back to it, I've embraced it all a bit now. They have understood, however, that it isn't always jokey, because we're not there. I don't think we're there to entertain you. The message is come and work at Novi. We're a great bunch of people. And, you know, if we can make you be successful at the same time, why not? And so from that perspective, any social media that gets the name out there, and you talked about the Cybertruck at the beginning, that was a way of getting us known. When I first joined Novi, which was last year, I knew what I was getting myself into, because obviously it's not a big brand name that people have heard of. It's not an international name. So I knew it was going to be difficult, but I thought with my connections, with maybe people connecting me with the company would make it a bit easier. Again, perhaps I've underestimated that, because again, people are they're a creature of habit as well, so they don't necessarily do what they say. But I have had a lot of people come on the back of either knowing me or hearing me. And as I say, to know that I've changed either people's lives. I mean, one minute you're an architect, next minute you're a real estate agent, you know, now you're working here and making a new life. And
it's rewarding.
It is rewarding. And I also love it when I get letters from the column, because the column I write and it gets printed in the National, but I do often get letters saying, thank you, as a result of your advice. I got courage to either take my tenant to court or take my landlord to court, and I won.
Yeah.
And
purpose, it gives you purpose.
Look, again, I profess I don't know everything, but I know what the law is. Now, the interpretation of the law is also something that I always add as a caveat in my letters, in my emails, because it is always up to the judge of the day to understand and to deliver, because the law in the UAE is not set on precedent. So what happens here, exactly the same is happening here, doesn't mean you'll have the same result. It's up to the judge at the time. And so I always end with that caveat on a lot of my emails.
And I mean, you've done like superbly well building your personal brand. You might not think you've got a personal brand, you do. How important do you think it is for real estate agents to work on a personal brand to differentiate themselves from the competition?
It's 100% necessary, despite what I've said about, you know, living in the past and all the rest of it. Social media is definitely not going away. You have to embrace it. And some people are not good in front of the camera. Some people prefer to be behind the camera. And that's okay as well, because you can do reels.
Faceless stuff.
You can do faceless stuff. You can do reels about community, about projects and properties where you don't necessarily have to talk in front of the camera. But I always say, if you are not online, you are nowhere.
You don't exist.
And I mean that also not just from Instagram, Facebook,
it
TikTok,
could even be
and all the
LinkedIn.
rest of it. Well, I'm talking LinkedIn 100%. It's the business side of things. But I mean it from the point of view of the portals as well. You know, if your listing isn't, you know, high up on the page. And I always say to my agents, make sure that, you know, the title is amazing, which is why I say don't necessarily use ChatGPT. Make it your own, own it. Change the photos around. Yes, of course, it's always about the price. But sometimes, especially if it's on with a few other agents, what separates it out? And you need to be there as an agent. And you also need to be super agent. You need to be true broker and all these things, because people add a lot of value to it. And again, if they add value to it, they'll use it. So if you are not online personally or professionally on these portals in a good way, then it's a harder task. That's not to say you still can't succeed, but it is a much harder hill to climb.
And there are people who, I mean, you automatically assume if you're a real estate agent or in the industry, manager, sales manager, owner, that you'll have confidence, that you'll be comfortable being in front of the camera. It's not always the case. Just because you're confident talking to people and selling to people, you know, running teams, whatever it may be, doesn't mean you can get in front of the camera. And I want to get a snippet or a golden nugget from that book that you mentioned at the beginning, Confidence. But was it Neil McKenna?
Paul McKenna.
Paul McKenna, that's it.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaways from that book?
Well, bearing in mind, I was reading that book over 16 years ago.
Right.
I haven't picked it up since. I can't remember.
Okay.
Silvia.
All right. Well, what's your advice on gaining confidence?
Well, I would say it doesn't matter what sort of a character you are. And it's true. Most people think that real estate agents are extroverts. You know, they're in your face. if you find it easy to talk to people, then clearly you're going to have an advantage. I always say when you go to networking events, you see people just standing on the wall, you know, perhaps holding their drink or not. Why are you there? Go and talk to people, introduce yourself. Talk to anybody and everyone. I always say that because you never know who you're talking to. And that person, if they're not interested potentially in, dare I say, investing in Dubai real estate, they'll know somebody that is. And if they engage with you or they like something that you've said, then they might take your number, they might remember you, and that starts a conversation. But don't just do it once. Follow-ups, that's very important. But you can be an extrovert, and you can be an introvert and also be successful. Because not everybody likes those people that rah, 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 in your face, you know. Some people also need to take a step back. And often in my training sessions, I say to people, you've got 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. And I always say, listening skills are very important as well. Listen to what the client says. Repeat back what your understanding is. But then people change their minds anyway. And bear that in mind when you do your follow-ups. Are you still looking for a 3-bedroom on the Palm? Well, actually, I ended up buying a townhouse in Town Square. Wow, where did that come from? You know, people won't pick up the phone and speak to their agent and say, oh, by the way, I've changed my mind. I'm no longer for this. So if you don't follow up with people, you'll never know. So listening is very important. So the two characteristics of being introverted and extroverting, being an introvert and extrovert, it is perceived that the extrovert will get all the attention. But be careful for the quiet ones as well.
And there's a lot of quiet, silent killers in Dubai real estate, right?
Well, it's definitely a load of backstabbers, let's put it that way.
And I want to close on your golden nuggets for different people. So
Golden nuggets.
Your golden nuggets right now for home buyers.
Okay.
And home sellers. And finally, for real estate professionals. So what would you advise or what would you be telling home buyers today?
So for home buyers, you mean secondary market, not necessarily investors. But you see, to me, a home buyer is someone who's buying a property for themselves to live in. And actually their criteria is very different to an investor. You know, the investor doesn't have to necessarily even like the property. As long as the figures work, the rental returns are there, the service charges are low, etc. So if the figures work, they go for it.
So let's make it buyers.
Well, anyway, we digress. But so a buyer, I would say that if you are lucky enough to have a recommendation to work with a specific agent, do so.
Right.
And do not be frightened to give that agent your 100% time. Because there is a misconception both for buyers and for sellers, that the more agents I work with, the greater the opportunity I will get to my end goal. So on the seller's side, again, don't be frightened to work with just one company. In fact, it's probably better to work with one company because the broker will be invested. He knows he's going to get a fee. And actually, there's a message I need to get out. Sellers, you can't get away with not paying your agent just because you say the buyer pays. More often than not, agencies work together. And sometimes, quite often, the buyer agent will not share their fee. Well, we don't work for free. Therefore, we need to get our fee from the seller. And on the odd occasion, yes, we'll have buyer and seller. But it is not illegal, as per RERA, to charge both buyer and seller. As long as everybody knows the score and is aware of it, it's not illegal. And the fee can be whatever the parties agree at. The norm is obviously 2%. When you're working with an exclusive agent, like I say, the broker is going to be invested. The marketing will probably be better. You have one point of contact. And if you tell them, I want this, this, and this, and they then don't perform or they don't listen to you, you'll go on to the next person. But if you're on with 3 online and then 100 in pocket, all sorts of shenanigans go on. And sometimes the same buyer, because they're going everywhere, is putting offers on the same property through different people. You as a seller think there's multitude of buyers, but actually it's just one. And that buyer is bidding on himself, and you think the market's even better than it is. So, but if you work with one company and build that relationship, then definitely you're more likely to do a deal. Now, of course, if the agent isn't working well, then fine, change. And there are plenty of them out there. But try and find recommendations is what I would say. And the last one was for
agents. But before we go on to that, I want to, because in the UK, it's common practice for the sellers to pay, not the buyers.
I know. So we are lucky here in some respects that agents can actually gain a commission also from buyers. But let's not forget that 2% and 2%, okay, equals 4. And you're lucky if you can get that. Generally speaking, it's 2%. In America, it's 6 and 7% for one deal. And I'm sure there are many other countries that collect a lot more commission as well, or to the same level as America. So remember, if you are getting the service and you're getting the advice and you're getting everything that you're expecting, don't begrudge the fee. When you go to the dentist, you go there and you pay the fee because the guy's actually or lady has been studying medicine and specifically dentistry for goodness knows how many years. So if there is an individual that you're working with who has got that intellectual property, like again, we don't know everything, but can guide you, then work with them and pay them.
And the final one is for real estate professionals. It could be anyone in the industry.
So mainly for newbies or new people to industry.
And that would be less than 6 months in the industry?
Yeah, I guess so. Would be lower your expectations. Right. Standards must always be very high, but lower your expectations, because if you think you're coming into real estate because you hear the market is all great guns and off-plan is this and secondary market is that, and yes, the market is with us, but because of the competition, because of the regulations, because you have to have XYZ document, and and when computer says no, and all the rest of it, it can be tough. And therefore, that's why I say there's so many people that don't make it into real estate or don't succeed in it because it isn't for anyone. It isn't for everyone. No, they may start out with the grit, but I don't know, it just gets eroded away. And I've had people who have understood it's difficult, but then have actually said, you know what, I need to get a salary job. I knew it was tough, but I didn't know it was this tough. So like anything, level playing field. You can become a millionaire or you can lose all your money. So lower your expectations and make sure, we'll end on this perhaps, make sure you have the thickest skin going. Because if you are somebody that takes things personally, you're not going to survive.
And I've heard that quite a few times, especially from some of the agents that I've interviewed recently, is that you can't take anything personally.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as a fellow podcast host, I'll let you wrap up the show. Say whatever you want.
Okay. So this has been Mario Volpi on the Golden Nuggets show with Silvia. Thank you. Thank you for finally convincing me to come. I hope that...
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. I hope that the listeners have enjoyed my story and, listen to the Dubai Property Podcast as well.
Link below.
Come and have a coffee at Novi. We're next to Golden Diamond Park. So, I hope you've enjoyed it.
And if you could just drop your favorite part in the comments. Thank you very much. Thank you.